I'm so glad to be with you today. I've missed you a lot. I'm so sorry about November. I got really, really sick. So we had this earthquake and I couldn't join you because the internet was out. And then I got sick and was sick for weeks. So I couldn't do a makeup. I'm sorry about that. But I'm so glad to talk today because we've just crossed the threshold of solstice and very powerful solstice indeed. Very subtle for many and very intense for others. So I'm curious about how it went for you. It was very intense for me, and I had a feeling it would be. So I prepared and did a lot of emotional processing and really clearing any sort of resistance to what this solstice that just happened a week ago, what this solstice could bring. So I'd like to talk to you about that, about solstice and what I'm seeing from here on out for humanity, for all of us, but also for the earth and nature. Many things have changed, many things will be going away and being replaced by many new things. So I definitely want to delineate what are those new things that are coming and what needs to be left behind. A lot of this will be very personal for you. So, we bring that personal up to the universal in our community calls together. But I've sure missed you, and I've been thinking about all of you so much and wanting to connect in this way. And we will be keeping it up, of course, over the next years to come. And I have many wonderful things to share with you over 2022, including bringing quantum healing to the forefront. It's time for quantum healing to be available to all of us. And it's something I've been working with for a long time. It's not something I would say I developed whatsoever. It's more that I remember it. And many of you too will also remember quantum healing and how that works. My intention is to do a 6-month training and help you to integrate the healing work you already do, or if you don't already have a healing business, get started with this technique and turn it into a business that can work for you. This way, it benefits as many people as possible. The more healers we can get out there doing quantum healing, which can be done remotely, the better. And among many things, I'm excited. I don't know exactly what this next year is going to bring because the playing field is still revealing itself. In 7 days, it's impossible to see exactly what this new playing field really is, but we can get a little glimpse now, and healing is on the table, my friends. And that's how we become Homo luminous. A being of light, a human of light, is through more and more healing. And speaking of that, in the description section, so in the video, there's a little tiny like arrow in the corner here on the bottom, and I'm pointing to where it would be in the video. There's this little arrow. If you click that, it opens up and there's a link. And that link is for free resources that I personally use every day to help you heal. And share them. Share them as you wish if you like them, and use them, modify them, play with them. Lots of people use this work, and it's been really, really interesting to see how people might tweak it a little bit so it can work better for them, or they like it just the way it is. So play with it. Play with these resources. It's time now. Healing is on the table. That's the first message I have to give to you today. So, the solstice, let's talk about what happened. It was pretty interesting for me. And while some friends reported an immense amount of dissolving going on beforehand, that definitely was happening too. I got really, really sick with a cold after that earthquake last month, which is why I couldn't join you. But that earthquake was pretty amazing and just a little glimpse of how much power and consciousness the earth really has. But right after the earthquake, I got a really bad cold and it laid me out. And honestly, I brought it in because I was feeling pretty burned out. And I work really hard and I try to pack a lot in. And I'm not a terribly good boss to myself, I have to admit. So I don't take enough time off. I don't really rest. I really don't because I work when I'm dreaming too. I know many of you do as well. So you can relate. So my body was saying, look, you really need to rest. And it forced me to rest. And as I was in this state of resting, a dissolving came up, a dissolving of many things. And the things that needed to dissolve were the way that I relate to the world and the way that I run all of this beautiful source light that, of course, makes up all of reality, including you. How I run that source light through my ego and my consciousness, how I run it and I project on other people, but I also bring in projections, right? And this is really interesting because it's part of the kind of mysticism that I've been taught is that projection is pretty consistent, it's constant, it's something that we're all going to face a lot. It's something that we pick up all day long. And it's because light is being run through lenses, right? And for me it was much more than just a lens, it was a shield. It's the shield that I've had for eons to keep me safe, to keep the skills I have under wraps, right? And it was built of amusement. You know, life is pretty amusing when you're focusing on the light that is moving, right? And everything that you're experiencing in all these living dimensions that you have access to is light moving. Even the dark, dense stuff is actually made of light under pressure, consciousness under pressure. But even that has movement and change. And it's something we can count on in the dimensions. But that's not the light of source. Source light doesn't move, it's still. From all things does the movie arise, right? The movie is playing. But this is source. Source doesn't move. Source is the screen. And so we run this light. We move it. It moves through our personalities, our desires and fears, our survival ego, our personality ego. And we run it through and it creates different forms and patterns that attract other forms and patterns. So when we go through times where we feel like a victim, and we might say, I have victim written on my forehead, right? I've definitely said that in my life because I felt like I kept attracting all these tyrants in my life, right? And that's true. I was totally attracting them because I was running light through my trauma, through my personality, my ego, my shield, and it was distorting it. Anything that's not that still light is being transformed, it's being distorted or embellished or recreated by what we think as the personal consciousness, the personal self. The universal self is different. It sees all of that, but that's not what's important. What's important is the screen from whence it all came, the screen on which it's playing, and it comes from the still light while it's also playing into the still light, right? So if we're looking at it as a foundation, your life is a trajectory that comes from the stillness of that light, but it also goes back to it. And your life is all about going back to it. So all that has to dissolve. And at least in me, that's where I'm at. That's the inner world, the inner path I'm taking is going into that full dissolving so that I only become the still light. That's all that I intend to be left in the end is just the still light. And that's happening and it's dramatic. It's painful because all the things that I thought I was, all the purpose and amusement I've had in my life, all the joy, all the pain, it's moving light and not putting all my value on that movement anymore. It brings it back home into the I am present and then beyond that presence into the stillness where I become nothing and no one. And being no one is my new favorite goal, being no one. And it's very powerful. It's very difficult because I have a family, I have a husband, I have friends, and I have a life, I have a career. And all those things are really all going to be nothing too. But I see very clearly that if I can be no one, then the light that has created all those beautiful things that I love and all those challenging things that I've been afraid of, that is what's most important. And it's there in everything. And I'm finally able to sort of move through the movie and see this. I haven't embodied it yet. I think that's going to take a while. But I can see it. I can see it in everything. I can see the movement and the stillness. And I can really feel how immense and beautiful all of it is. That there is nothing in the darkness that isn't exactly where it needs to be right this moment. And that there's nothing in the light, nothing that I love that isn't exactly the way it was meant to be played out. And so this is this new state. And it seems to me, at least from my perspective, that this is what the Homo luminous is all about. And I don't know if that's true for all of humanity. This isn't all for everyone, I think. But I haven't talked about it, so I'm kind of stumbling on my words, sorry. I think it for me at least this is the path that I'm on at the moment. And honestly, it's not even a path anymore. The path's gone. So that's interesting not to have a purpose, to dissolve the purpose that I've had for eons and eons. I remember it, but that's gone too. And with solstice, as all that dissolving was going on, it was very dramatic. It was very painful. I couldn't even talk to my friends about it. I felt kind of nuts every day because it was just falling apart. But as solstice arrived, I got up and I was really ready. And thankfully, it wasn't at like 3 a.m. this time. For me, it was like at 11. Actually, it was 10:59 a.m. exactly, right? So um, I sat and I was drawn to go outside and meditate, and it was raining. But I have a nice little porch, so I was sitting out on my porch and I could feel it like, no, you need to come sit out into the rain. So I moved my chair. Rain doesn't scare me. I'm from Washington State in the US, so rain's cool. So I'm sitting there, but it was the wildest thing because suddenly the rain stopped just around me. And now, please don't misunderstand this as self importance. I really don't think that my particular perspective is much more than a drop in the ocean. But this is what happened. So I'm sitting in the rain, and then it suddenly stops. But only over me. The whole yard was still raining. It was like there was a little circle or a vortex of over me. And it opened up, and all I could see was the sun right there directly above me. And I began to meditate, and the sun, it dropped down, and it sort of took over my body. It was like the sun and me became one just for like 30 minutes. But I don't remember what happened in that 30 minutes because all I know is that there was just light and it was very still. And it was very intense. And I'm not even sure exactly what happened to my body or me. But I think that's definitely it. It left. There was nothing but light. It left. There was no body. There was no personal self anymore. So that was really intense. So for 30 minutes, there was just light and the rain and this beautiful feeling of nothingness and no one but the most pleasant, most beautiful nothing you could ever imagine. So that happened. And then the rest of the day unfolded fairly normally. But I was in this sort of state of bliss because it was just so beautiful and so light, and I felt very empowered. I felt different, but it's subtle. There's a subtle difference. And some of you know that I have some property here in Yangana. There's a sacred mountain that through many years and very interesting happenings, I've been able to purchase. And I don't feel that I'm the owner of this land. It's the other way around. This land owns me. And so I've been learning to listen to the land. Well, since solstice over this past week, it's been much easier to listen to the land. And I've been cleaning up the land. There's a lot of old trash on this land, and there's um, a lot of lack of love for the land. And the land felt hungry, it was needing attention. And at first, it was like, you know, like I would have imagined too, being the land, you're just another crazy white person showing up who thinks they can own me, right? And so I have been very diligently for 3 months now, every time I come, greeting the land as my friend, introducing myself very slowly, letting her get to know me, letting her know that I can hear her, that I'm listening, and cleaning up the land and moving things around with permission and noticing what's needed, feeding the hungry heart of planet Earth. And so this has been very humbling and very transformative. It makes you feel quite small when this beautiful land can absorb you at any time and can do amazing magical things that is very difficult to describe. But the kind of levels of light, the qualities of light and dark and everything in between laying itself out, the consciousness of every little thing there and being able to honor it and not require anything of it, right? So when I show up just saying, I don't need anything from you, I just want you to know how much I love you. And then seeing what she needs. So I'll give you an example. The very front corner of the property, right by the road, had quite a lot of trash. And so I was cleaning it up by hand and just literally like handfuls by handfuls of moving things around and cleaning it out. And this one very direct corner of the property by the front gate, I kept cleaning it and cleaning it. And as I'm cleaning it, suddenly, and this is constantly happening, I move all this trash out of the way, and the most beautiful plant just appears. And it had been hidden by all this trash. And I keep moving all this trash, and I'm like, this corner, it feels done to me, right? But I get this very clear speaking of the land. No, it's not done. Keep cleaning. So keep cleaning. And then I find more plastic trash behind the plant. So I pull out this big chunk of plastic, and then suddenly it's like this, and the land is like, now it's finished. But that whole corner just glows now. And it's so beautiful, this beautiful plant that nobody could see before, right? Or I moved some trash yesterday, big chunk of trash. I picked it up, and there's the most beautiful, colorful centipede. In Ecuador has some wild bugs, but this beautiful centipede appears. Another gift, right? Like, oh, thank you. Let me show you something beautiful. And each of these are conscious, this plant, this bug, and they're giving light, right? They don't have an ego. They're just a pure conduit of that source light. They don't have any personalities to run all this stuff through, or a whole bunch of horrifying trauma, genetic trauma, personal trauma. So you receive all this light, these big bursts of light when you're doing this kind of work. But it's an exact metaphor for the inner work. It's no different, right? So when we do this clearing of the physical, we receive gifts from the earth. But my friends, when you do the inner work, when you're clearing your trauma and your reactions, then you're doing the same thing. But the inner realms, the multidimensional inner realms, they too reveal gifts to you. And in that revealing is further transmissions of light, is deeper and deeper light that you receive from the inside out. It's not different. It makes sense for me to describe it from the outside in, but all you have to do is flip it. So find something that you react to negatively each day. Find something that you have not fully reconciled, right? So, my friend, she says reconciliation is one of the best things you can do. And we don't always know how to do that, but we can ask. And you don't ask with your head, you got to ask with your heart. Hey, dear land, what spot would you like us to work with today? What can we do to scratch your itch? Where is a spot that you really need us to focus on right now? Or, dear beautiful earth, would it be all right if we planted an orchard here? And where should we plant these trees exactly? Would that be okay for you? For us to bring in a whole lot more food and abundance that will be food for the animals and plants and the bugs too, and the mycelium. So there's a lot of nourishment too. We don't just need to like move the trash out of the way. We need to revel in the light that's available after we move the trash out. It's important to really embody the light. And so to notice the centipede and say, "You are so beautiful." To notice the plant and say, "I'm so glad you're here." To notice that person in your life that has come after you've healed some kind of trauma, because now there's room. Now there's room in your field for something new. And find a place in your heart for that new light, for that new friend. So when we move it out of the way, the trauma, the reactions, then we're cultivating the ground, making it ready for something new, for something possibly very wild, for something very organic, for something that is going to be the exact right thing. And it will be nurtured in your field, not because you have to do any work, but because it naturally will happen. So, this is what's on the table. But this is also where we're going to talk about what's the stuff that we got to get rid of, right? One of the messages among many that I think are unfolding from the solstice. What is the solstice? Well, it's a crest of consciousness. From June till December, we had this new wave of consciousness where we were preparing ourselves for the wave to drop, right? And now we're at that moment. Now it's dropping. But as it's dropping, there's this very clear message of what are you going to leave behind? What are you finished with? What are some of the laws and rules and strict structures and stuff, like trauma and other crap that just isn't going to work in the world anymore? What are you going to leave behind? Are you going to leave behind simple things like looking at your cell phone while you're in a restaurant? Are you going to leave behind more difficult things, like some chunks of your personality that maybe you can replace with something better and weirder than you ever thought? And what else? That's the personal self, right? What else is being left behind? The laws of nature are changing for a lot of reasons. And some of those reasons are because it's galactic changes happening now. We're at the end of an age and the beginning of a new one. And some of these things are really playing out. So, what else gets left behind? Well, the galaxy's choosing a lot of things. The planet herself is choosing some stuff to leave behind. And the new stuff that's coming in to replace it has to do with the elements, it has to do with humanity not being stewards anymore, waiting for the owner to come back. That's what steward means. Waiting for the sovereign owner to show up. No, 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 no. The earth owns herself. She is a sovereign being herself. We're not stewards. The owner didn't go anywhere. What are we? We're symbiotic. Your body is a symbiotic meta being that is 12 dimensional in form and function. But your embodiment is deeply and symbiotically connected to the planets. So, our sort of process of becoming the light is also the Earth's process. So, the new state of being is intimately symbiotic, where when we move the trash out of the way of the old, the new can arise and transmit and transform the field of consciousness. And so, the old you need to understand what that is and recapitulate. I want to offer you this idea. My teacher, Lucia Renee, my mystical teacher, and I come from that lineage. I have a lineage of mysticism. And if you want to do this slowly, do it on your own. But if you want to do this fast, receive a teacher into your life. Notice I didn't say find, receive a teacher into your life, okay? So I have a teacher, and she did one of the most profound pieces of work I've ever witnessed her do in 12 years of knowing her, called recapitulation. I highly recommend you go check this out. It's luciarenee.com. Go to her offerings and go get her recapitulation series. So Lucia Renee, LuciaRene.com. Go grab the recapitulation series, my friends. If you want to do something for yourself that's going to change your life, do this. What she does is help you track through your whole life with a fine tooth comb and get all the most fantastic gold nuggets. Everything you need is in this life. You don't need to remember your other lives. You will, and it's cool, but that's not what you really need to look at. That's a distraction. Ultimately, if you start with your past lives, you're not going to get through this very quickly. But if you start with this one, this is all you need. This one. Because this is the body you're in right now, right? This is where all the action is. It's in the present. So go recapitulate this life. Fine tooth comb it. Make sure you get those healing resources because you're going to want to know how to do emotional processing while you do this. It's very important for you to be able to gain the most out of that series. Get really clear on how to do emotional processing properly. And these two things are the best thing I could recommend you doing over this next year. And take your time, there's no rush. Because what's going to happen is all those gold nuggets, they're going to be turned into great amounts of light in your life that will make everything make a lot more sense of who you are exactly and ultimately lead you home in your trajectory to find that you are actually this. You are the source field. But we say that and we don't feel it. We don't really believe it, really. If you believed it really, then you'd be enlightened and be able to perceive it in all beings, right? And nothing would that you'd have no reactions anymore, right? Because you'd be working so diligently on removing any ego that was keeping you from this light. But that's the thing, is that's quite hard to do, right? And we can't reach enlightenment with the mind anymore. That's the other thing that's changed. The mind, mental enlightenment doesn't cut it anymore. And that's what it used to be. It has been even up till like a decade ago. All these enlightened masters with a huge amount of ego still. Because enlightenment doesn't mean you're free of ego. It means that now you're aware you are the source field, right? But we're talking about embodiment of enlightenment now. Full body enlightenment is what's on the table. That's Homo luminous. And that requires zero ego. So we've got our work cut out for us. That's what it requires. It requires you to keep going into I am only the source field until that's all that you have. So that's the key. That's where we're at. But if you'd like that to happen faster, if you'd like to experience that, I highly recommend you do the recapitulation that my teacher created. It's really the very best work I've ever seen her do. And she's a published author with awards and many, many other things. Incredible work. And if you want to know who I know all this stuff from, then learn from her because that work is there. And you can definitely learn from me. I've got cool stuff too to share, but again, receive a teacher. It might be me or it might not be me, and that is perfect. There's a teacher for everybody. I had a friend once say, I found this teacher. I finally can get in my body, and she's teaching these certain things. And I'm wondering, why you don't teach these things. And I said, well, actually, I do. And I named how I teach all these things. And I said, but the reason why you didn't or couldn't learn it from me is because I'm not meant to be your teacher. There's a teacher out there for everybody. And it wasn't me because I have this very specific essence. And this other lady, she has a very specific essence that resonated better with my friend. So she could finally get all these things that she'd heard me talk about, but they didn't click, you know? And so be in receiving right now. Open your heart and give this intention to source and say, I'm ready to receive a teacher if you don't already have one. And that's, of course, if you don't already have one. But then you can look at, well, who's the teacher's teacher, right? And I've learned so much from my teacher's teacher, Dr. Frederick P. Lenz. I have learned from him nearly as much as I have from my own teacher. And that's a lineage. And the lineage, then, you're receiving much more than just a teacher. You're receiving source and you're receiving the lineage's wisdom. And so I encourage you then to make that connection. Just be open and let source hand it to you. It might come as a link to a call from a friend. It might come as an email. It might come as a passing thing that you hear randomly at a coffee shop. It came to me as me searching for a job. And I went and I looked for a job and I found this job to be a personal assistant and I replied to the job. And then the ball rolled from there. So that's the kind of way you'll receive is in an unexpected way. But you'll receive what you need. It's time now for you to have your teacher and your lineage show up and to really be available to you. So, this is what's playing out as well. This is sort of what's coming up it's old but new. It's like a refurbished version of the relationship with the teacher. And my relationship with my teacher is deeply reciprocal, right? I give to her and she gives to me, and it's a deep, deep, loving friendship in which we learn immense amounts together. It's not a power over dynamic, it's deeply empowering. And I get the beautiful blessing of helping to empower and watch the empowerment of anything I might offer, however small, really, truly be set in that field and opened up fully and nurtured. So that is what a good teacher relationship would look like now. And we're going to need new words for this stuff, folks, because teacher student has connotation, just like the word ego does or the word enlightenment. That's the cool part about change is that you can always guarantee that because human culture has very specific universal functions, that beliefs and words will change along with what's changing in the physical, which is you. And you and your personal embodiment are changing in the physical all the time. And as that changes, the beliefs and words and ideas of reality change too, and everything in between, which is why we're going to have new social structures. We're going to have new cultural contexts. We're going to have new political economies that are definitely not the ones we're looking at now. And they're not going to have anything to do with the types of currencies and concepts that you're being bombarded with right now. That's going to go too. It's going to be very different, and we're going to imagine it together and we're going to remember it together because this is a deep merger of the old and new, as you can see in my description of receiving a teacher is both old and new ways to see it. So that's what's on the table as well. The other thing is we've been be, we've been getting a lot more sort of, I might say, fan club interest, right? The human experiment, which is over, and now we're the ones deciding what the experiment's going to look like. That's why it's old and new all at the same time. We have a fan club out there in all dimensions. And some of that club, they want some of this. They want some of the power. They want some of the light. They want to ride the coats, or even worse, hook into it and take whatever they want. But some of them are here to support. They really just want to observe. They want to be available if needed, but they don't want to meddle, right? And then everybody in between. Some of them have been here for ages and ages and have been quite dormant until now. The elementals are one of them. But these beings have their own histories and their own traumas. And so if you're being encountered by any of this stuff, if this is showing up in your life, new beings that you haven't experienced before, maybe old ones, guides, it's time to change the relationship you have with these beings. Now, that's really key because most of the guides that when I do work with people, they're being guided by beings. Maybe they're angels, right? Or maybe they are other beings from other lifetimes that you've had, galactic ones. Maybe you have a Syrian grandma who likes to help you out, right? Or you have a whole bunch of angels that save your butt every time you do something dumb. But, I always want you to notice something. Unless they are human, then they don't have a human agenda. And that's okay. But right now, it's the human agenda that's important. So, unless they are human, they don't have a human agenda. Even the angels want to go home. They're tired of their stupid brethren running around messing stuff up. We call them demons. But they're fed up. They don't want to fight this war anymore. They want to go home. They don't have a human agenda. They're not human. So that's okay. But we need to put the human agenda first. So unless they have a human agenda, because they're human, because they're an ancestor, you know, a healed ancestor versus an unhealed ancestor. I'm not going to go seek advice from my racist grandma who passed over, even though I love her with all my heart and I only want her healing. But I will seek advice from other ancestors who have been healed, who are awake and available, right? So even then, you need to be careful. Always be very, very careful about guidance from the outside, folks. Teachers included. And the best guides and the best teachers will always be able to say, I don't know. They'll always be able to say, this is only from my perspective. They'll always be able to have a sense of humor, even in the darkness. And they're always going to be very careful to empower you and not give you every single answer. If they're giving you every single answer, then you're depending on them not being empowered. That's how you'll know if it's good guidance or a good teacher. And that's only from my perspective. I'm sure there's many more pieces to it, but that's at least from what I've learned in this life. So the other thing is this is kind of a galactic opening now. The Earth's electromagnetic field is really fully closed down. So we're being bombarded by quite a lot of really interesting energy. And all that energy has a dramatic effect on your mind, your dreams, the way you're sleeping, how your body's healing or not healing, your addictions. All of these things get really revved up by new energy because it's either going to stay in that new energy or it's got to go, which is why that's part of the message of solstice this year. This solstice is saying, hey, what's some stuff that's got to go? Notice it. Just notice it and say goodbye, right? Notice what's going to come in that's new. A new relationship with the same thing, but in a very different way that's going to benefit not only you, but all of consciousness. And so, let me give you a good example. I've always struggled with alcohol. It just is the best painkiller I could have ever found. And I'm in physical pain to a degree that, a lot of you have heard this before, but I'm at like a level 7, and that's a good day on a normal day, right? So 7 out of 10. 10 being like, I feel like I'm dying and I can't bear this anymore. So I've learned how to turn my pain into light, which keeps me from having to take pain medication. But my nervous system, having been in pain for so long and having had trauma, my nervous system doesn't know how to like take it down a notch. So my vagus nerve will be in like a slight panic all the time. And the only thing over all these years that I've found that worked really well to keep it down a notch was alcohol, right? So, I grew to really like alcohol a lot. And so I drank a lot when I was in college to the point where I'd start craving it. I remember calling my mom saying, "You know what? I'm going to humble myself right now and say I'm starting to come into a place where I feel like I'm beginning to be addicted to alcohol." And she was very compassionate to me because it's just something that many of our families have struggled with, right? But I remember like noticing that. Now that's really key. That's just, mental prowess showing up and saying, hang on a minute. But, in this dissolving process, part of what had to dissolve is my relationship with food and alcohol. And it needs to be something entirely new. So I went to this woman who I've been getting some help from because I've had lots of different kinds of illness that is difficult to treat and very rare and strange stuff that is difficult to even talk about really. Um, and she's a very, very powerful healer here in southern Ecuador who understands the microbiome, right? She's a microbiologist who works with herbs, and she makes these tinctures, and they're just these living, dynamic, incredible tinctures, right? And she pulls in, every living plant that she can think of that would support somebody, and you begin a process of experimenting. What works, what doesn't? And she gave me these tinctures and was helping me with all of this, and just was really astounded at how powerful all this has been. Well, I admitted to her, I said, I crave alcohol sometimes because my nervous system and the work that I do is so stressful and intense, and that I struggle with that fight or flight that's pretty constant and like a low level panic. And she was just so open hearted and compassionate about my struggle. And she said, Elizabeth, what if you just changed your relationship by making your own wines and meads with medicinal herbs in them? I'd never thought of it that way. I'm going and buying cheap wine so I can sleep. Like, and she's like, what if you made your own? And now wine isn't wine anymore, beer isn't beer, now it's medicine. And you make your own with the right herbs that you know will work for you. It like blew my mind. I'm like, whoa. And from that moment, that I decided to have a different relationship and that I was open to it, the new relationship appeared as this thing that I could do, right? But more so, ever since then, and this was last week, I haven't been craving alcohol because now I know that I have a new relationship with it and I haven't had any alcohol at all since that day. No, that's not true. I had a glass of wine at dinner last night, but only one glass. And it wasn't like this big deal. I didn't feel guilty about it, nor did it have any sort of effect on me at this point. It takes a lot more than one glass of wine, but it was really powerful moment to be able to have a nice dinner at this really great Italian restaurant, have a glass of wine with my Italian dinner, and not have this whole guilt trip or pain or, okay, I'm drinking this so that I can go to sleep tonight. Attitude around it was totally different, right? It works. This whole shift, use this time right now. It has nothing to do with the personal self. This is the universal self coming in and refreshing your life. And I just want to give you a personal example of what that looks like and how it can change. And that's just one example. I have so many right now that I like a different way of approaching my marriage and my children. Like all this stuff is changing and refreshed and new and like way more healthy for us, right? So I just want to encourage you because I love to be transparent with you and I like to tell you what's really going on from a real life perspective from somebody who has a very normal looking life on the ground, even though my brain is definitely not normal. So, that being said, your specialness, even your relationship to your own skills, these things now are ready to change. Your relationship to your body. I'm noticing a change in that too. I'm leaving behind this incredible amount of self-hatred. Man, we have been doused in this. Doused. I've always said to you, it's the number one thing that absolutely destroys humanity is the human hate program. And it's powerful. And that level of division, self-hatred cannot stand in the face of what the earth is bringing. So what she's bringing, what she's actualizing is pure love. That's why all this division is up right now. All over the globe. No human has escaped it, right? No human has escaped this because all the division, all that stuff that has to go is showing up to be seen. Piece of it. So like going and like for the first time, I have actually started hanging around friends without makeup. I am wearing makeup right now, but because I'd look pretty strange with this big, huge light that I have shining on me. But you know, for the first time, I'm actually hanging out with friends without makeup. This is a huge deal to me. It's huge. I had horrible cystic acne. My face looked like hamburger. I would go to breakfast in the morning and my dad would sit there and cry while he looked at me. Okay? That's how bad the scarring is really, and you can't see it on the camera. But the that's over. I don't hate it anymore. Actually, I think it's really interesting looking at this point. Like I, I remember getting a headshot and this guy is really good. And that's the headshot that's on my website. And he's really good. And the first rendering he gave me, he like went in like with Photoshop and went crazy and like completely took all my scars away. And my husband, he's like, "Oh my god, who is that?" I was like, ew, it looks like a fake plastic version of me. Weird. So I wrote him back. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Could you just not take anything away at all? Could you just leave it all pretty please? Because honestly, that makes me. People won't recognize me if they don't see my normal face, right? Or here's another one, all the ladies will laugh. I've been totally going around and like doing stuff, even in public, without a bra. Like, I would have never done that ever because I'm not small chested. So, I would have never done that. Nope. Totally have a different relationship now with all this. So this is very real. It's all the little stuff. Relationship, new relationship with clothes, with clothing. A new relationship with, of course, all the bugs that I'm seeing. I certainly would have got the creeps at some of the things I've seen in Ecuador, but no, not anymore. Now when I see this new crazy looking bug, I'm like, wow, you're amazing. Wow, I want to know more about you, and then we'll try to go look him up. And we have on this beautiful mountain. There's a family of parrots that live up there, and toucanettes. They're mini toucans. They're the coolest, and they come down and they check us out, and we're neighbors. They don't belong to us. They don't. They are sovereign, but we have a relationship now, and it's new. It's different. So the elements too, like I was saying, are coming out for you to play with this new relationship and appreciate the consciousness of the elements and the elementals, a race of beings that exists and has been written about long ago, and they've been very quietly waiting for us to get to this point, waiting for the earth to open herself up again the way that she does every 12,000 years. So the past 12,000 years are now finished, folks. We're in the new age. And I don't mean that as in like spiritual new age. I literally mean it as like a temporal marker that is something measurable that happens with the sun, the earth, the solar system, and the galaxy, as well as the universe. This is literally like, if you're tracking changes over eons, the end of an age and the beginning of a new one. And this is physics, it's cosmology, it's astrophysics, it's earth physics. It's not just, esoteric. In fact, I'd argue the esoteric really is what gets the brunt of the change, while the physical, there's going to be and has been immense physical changes, but the esoteric is what it trickles down to. And those physical changes, while measurable, have dramatic effects on consciousness. And that's why we're in this state of new, right? So I've spoke for our first hour, and this is how I like to do our calls. I like to just kind of update you on the personal to the universal, what's going on, and collectively, this dissolving, which is still continuing, is very intense. But there's a big difference between trying not to get your hopes up and surrendering. My friends who moved here, they've had a lot of different things where that have happened where, something really beautiful and big that they'd be able to get involved in would be made available to them, right? And they'd get all their hopes up that it was going to work out, and then suddenly it didn't, or the rug would get pulled out from underneath it, or the leader would lose their mind, or whatever. And one of them said, I'm trying not to get my hopes up. And I said, wait a minute, what if you swapped that to I'm surrendering. Because every time we surrender, we get what we ask for, but in a better way. Here's why. You got to imagine, what you want. It's part of the human ability, actually. The human brain's amazing at going out and figuring out all the different stuff and possibilities, right? So, your kids at the playground and they're running full speed across the playground, and your brain, I know this because I've done it. Your brain's like, well, they could trip and completely, splat their face on the playground and get a cut. Maybe they bust their nose. That could happen right now. So you call out and you say, slow down a little, right? Because you just thought of these possibilities, and right now they're going full speed, and they're not the most graceful kid because none of them are until they get older. And so your brain thinks it out about what the possibility is, and in that moment it goes through its own predictive model, right? And it says it's a fairly high possibility they're going to trip and fall on their face. So then you make an adjustment by saying slow down a little, right? That's what I'm talking about, but on a grander, more conscious scale. So you got to think of all the possibilities from where you're at right now, not from some impossible place, but where you're at right now, in the state of your body now. And so you sit there and you simply sit, and if you're focusing, say, like on career or maybe family, or maybe you don't have a partner yet and you're looking for that, right? Those are the three biggest things usually on people's minds because they've been culturally trained to think that way. If I were you, I would also add in your spiritual path. And that's not something we're culturally encouraged to do, but throw it in there, right? I'd say that's equal to all those others. But think about for yourself, what are the possibilities from here? And your brain's naturally going to be like, "Ooh, I know how to do this." And it throws a net out, right? It reaches out to see, all right, if these five things happen, and you don't have to do that conscious calculation, it does it for you. That's how cool your human brain is. Isn't that amazing? But it's going to say in its own way, if these five things happen in this way, then this will happen. If they do it this way, then this will happen. And they go through all the bazillions of possibilities, and then the likelihood, and there's going to be a section of those possibilities that are more likely, right? And then it'll narrow it down to these are most probable. That's how amazing your brain is. It knows how to do all that really quickly. So you got to take your framework. So maybe it's your love relationship, spiritual path, right? And you throw it out and you say, well, what's the possibility from here? Well, it's quite amazing what suddenly you'll see is possible. And then you got to pick one. Now, here's the key, you can't be attached to this stuff, but you do have to choose because you're making all these little micro movements. And if you're working with time, which is actually spherical and is the universe itself, the source field has a function, and that's one of its functions is memory, and that's what time is. This is why I tell you there are no timelines. There aren't any timelines, folks. There's only micro adjustments to the navigation of reality. So right now you're making a micro adjustment by imagining what I'm telling you. But in the sphere of time, that micro adjustment turns into an entirely different trajectory altogether, all the time. You're constantly making micro adjustments to your grand trajectory. Now, you always end up at the same place. We all always go back home to source God. But how you're going to do it is the fascinating part because there's millions upon billions of endless ways that you could do that. But each moment you're making micro adjustments that are just so slight. And, 10 days ago, before solstice, my trajectory looked entirely different than it did today. And that's how amazing it is. So, this is how you're going to work with that. But you got to choose in that moment. All right, well, today, my spiritual path, if I meditate this morning, I know that I'll be in a better mood because that keeps happening. So I've convinced myself now that meditating makes me in a better mood, which makes my family life better, which makes my work easier, which makes my money situation more bearable or whatever, right? And so then in that moment, you're making a micro adjustment to receive that fact that meditation is helping you. And that gets you on a nice solid trajectory towards a goal. That goal perhaps could be enlightenment or not. Honestly, that's not for everyone. That stuff's hard. And there's other things that you can do that are also equally as hard or as interesting as you could ever imagine that aren't enlightenment. So there's lots of things that you're being called to do with your consciousness. Enlightenment isn't always the thing to do, folks. It just exists. Enlightenment is. It's not something you have to do. And that's the trick, right? But to get to a place of non-doing, there's a lot of doing that you have to do. It's pretty funny. Paradox. So these micro adjustments that you're making, you need to be able to imagine and create these goals, but then you have to feel it. So how would it feel to be enlightened, for example? I think about that every day. How would it feel? Well, I've talked to other people who are enlightened. I've heard about how they feel. And I'm also very interested in it more and more every day. So I get closer to it and I notice how it feels when I get a little closer. But I'm still on that journey inward until there's no more journey, right? Until you call off the search and then you are that and there's no more doing. So, that being said, the last piece is that you have to let it go. You have to imagine it, you have to feel it, and then you have to let it go. But to where? Well, to the source field. Because it turns out, as amazing as your brain is, it cannot imagine or create nearly as well as the source field does. Here's a good example. I was living in Kentucky for many, many years, and about 5 years, that's a lot to me in one spot. Yeah, because I've moved like so many times. I can't even tell you how many times I've moved. So being in one spot for 5 years is a big deal for me. And I had maybe one or two friends there, two or three actually, and that were good friends, but very few others. And that was very different for me. I'm a highly social person. I used to have birthday parties with over 100 people there, right? And I was a community builder. I did a lot of work with people. I loved it. I had so many friends and I'd play music and all sorts of stuff. But the Kentucky experience, I had to learn how to be alone. And at first it was agony. It was horrible. I had a birthday that came and went and had no friends to celebrate with. It was very hard. And I found myself deeply attached to friends and friendship. But it was also equally miserable to try to keep in touch with friends on the internet instead of being in person. So It was very difficult. And coming from a huge family, being alone was weird. Didn't know what to do with myself. So I finally got used to it to the point where I wasn't suffering anymore. So I processed my suffering around being alone and lonely, and I didn't feel lonely anymore. That was gone. I didn't feel sad for myself anymore either. That was gone. So I'd processed it all and I was quite content at having no friends, right? When we moved to Ecuador, and some very interesting people had come into my life and that I would definitely call friends, but it's different because many of them are a lot older than me. So it's not like we're hanging out, at a bar like I used to do, or having a potluck at my house or something, or trading babysitting with kids, or it's not like that. So that that was new, but again, I found myself not really being attached to friendship anymore. I was just really open to what was possible at that point. Well, then when I'm finally like totally content, right? I finally able to see it and feel it and be very content with being alone and let friendship go. Source had taken that desire for friendship. Source God had taken that and created the friends that I'd always wanted. And then they moved here 3 months ago. And I'm stunned because these are the friends I've always wanted. I never had friends quite like them before. I've never been able to relate to two people and feel immediately at home with them so well. I would have never been able to, in all my imaginings, come up with these two people. But because I was willing to let my desire go and give it to Source, Source did with it something amazing. And that's what we can count on. Same with our love relationships, right? If you're looking for one right now, if you're feeling that call, I want you to really delineate for yourself what the optimal situation would look like. Write it down, right? Really feel it. What would that really feel like? And then take your beautiful piece of paper, everything you've imagined and felt about it, all your desire, and surrender it. Don't hang on to it and say I'm going to hang on to I'm going to hope for this. And as it doesn't happen, you lose hope and you say I'm trying not to get my hopes up. Don't do that. Give it to source. Surrender. Surrender it, and source will do with it things that you can't have imagined, because source is omnipotent. The only thing that never changes is source. So from there, from whence all things come, will these things come? It happened to me with my marriage. I literally was told you need to let go of everything, not just by my own guidance and the guidance of the people around me, but by really good seers who said, Elizabeth, you're hanging on to a sandy bank while the river's trying to take you. Let go. Everything around that corner that you can't imagine, that you're afraid of because you can't see it, you can't imagine it, is of source. Let go and surrender. And very shortly after I was willing to let go, I met my husband. And he fulfilled my checklist, but he fulfilled things on that were not on my list. He fulfilled stuff I didn't know I wanted. And he was able to teach me things that no one else could. So be willing, my friends, to take the future of your life and your body and your world and hand it to source. It's time now for you to be able to do that. And the receiving that we will all get because of that, excuse me, the new global culture will be more beautiful than any of us can imagine right now. So let's go for it, right? We have nothing to lose. Maybe some ego, but and some trauma. But the rest of it is yet to be seen. The rest of it is the beautiful plant in the corner that you can't see because you're afraid to move that trash. Do it. Move the trash. You have no idea what's under there, man. And it's probably the coolest thing you've ever seen. It is. I know it is. I know it with my whole heart and my whole body. It's very exciting. All right. So I want to have some time at the end for us to build a pillar of light. It's our last pillar of light for 2021. And we didn't get to build one for November, so let's go all out with this one, right? I still don't know where we're going to do it, but um, the the Earth will tell us, right? But in the meantime, we still have about 30 minutes. I'd love to answer some questions. What's coming up for you? What's some questions you have right now about your life or the world or where we're all headed or the past? What's up? What's going on? I'd love to know. So I'm kind of looking back, and I did see this question, Lauren. She says, I've become really sensitive to Wi Fi for the first time. It makes me dizzy. Any suggestions? And honestly, I'm super sensitive to Wi Fi too. And it's pretty hard to escape, especially if you like live in an apartment building or in the house I'm in right now. I'm surrounded in other houses and they have Wi Fi. So for those of you who are becoming more and more sensitive to it, and it may be very well new to you, and I'm not surprised at all with all these changes going on that we're becoming more sensitive, and I am very much so. Um, Make sure you turn it off all night long, your own Wi Fi. If you have other EMF stuff, it's okay to take some foil, some tin foil, and cover it up for however long you need to. And you could petition to ask neighbors to help out by turning Wi-Fi off at certain hours. That's a thing, without coming in and like saying you're hurting me. You don't want to show up in a victim mode, but rather say, hey, there's some studies, and honestly, go look them up because there's some studies that Wi-Fi is not good for cellular health and things like that. Um, I'd like to petition that perhaps, between 11 or midnight and this hour that we turn it all off, right? Now sometimes people are up at night and they work at night, so they can't do that. We got to be gentle the best we can around all this. But the other piece too is to spend as much time in wild nature as you can, and that takes an effort. But if you can do that, your body will reset and it'll feel more able to manage when you're around more frequency stuff. So, and I found that to be the case. I spend my weekends out on the mountain. There's no Wi Fi. We do have electricity, but there's no cell phone service. There's no one around. There's no psychic pickup. It's glorious. And I get a full reset and have a lot more energy to be able to come and visit with you and do work with you as you come for sessions or classes and these sorts of things. But I'm also able to be a better mom and function better, right? So just do the best you can. Get wild, get out there in the outdoors, even if it's cold. Go ahead and, do the best you can safely. Turn off your Wi-Fi at night. Um, Turn it on only when you need it. These kinds of things. And just keep doing the best you can, right? There are, I think, clothing that can help with EMF, and I don't know that for sure because I haven't looked it up, but I can psychically see it that there's clothing. There's like long sleeve thin shirts that might have mesh in them, like very very fine mesh, kind of like a wearable Faraday cage. And then another friend of mine, he said that Oregon blanket could help as well. So you could sleep under. Uh, well, he said you shouldn't do that, but if you really feel overwhelmed and you're at home, you could wear a Faraday cage blanket. Excuse me, an Oregon blanket, and see if that helps to block some of that frequency stuff, right? So, Oregon little pyramids you can put around your house. That helps. I've actually seen the electromagnetic difference on proper functioning tools to measure that kind of thing. So give that a shot. There's lots of things we can be doing. And then the other option that I see very clearly is fill your house with plants. Plants really buffer this stuff and fill it. Fill your house with plants. Get lots of plants. And that really helps to bring in the negative ions that you need to heal your body. So I totally relate. I understand it's tough. It's not easy, especially if you're newly sensitive, right? And Jonathan says, we've been processing a lot of fear and it's been very tough, but we're also feeling that true purpose of waking up. And that's that big polarity that's happening right now is straight up pure total fear and awareness, clarity. What an interesting dynamic. And so go into the fear, follow your fear, unravel it. Follow your fear. If you want to do this mysticism fast, follow your fear, unravel it so that it becomes more and more and more light, and that brings clarity. It's nice and beautiful way to envision it. That by following your fear and unraveling that really dense energy, suddenly brings light. It's very sudden, by the way, which is why I say suddenly, but it's suddenly, and then there's clarity. Oh, that's why I'm afraid. Well, that makes sense. Oh, that next step. So, exactly right on the money, and not surprising how much fear and dissolving we're truly going through now at the end and the beginning of an age. Absolutely. Good. So, I'm kind of just scrolling through here our comments, and I do hope it's been able to bring you some some clarity. And I'm just looking at these really neat folks, lots of people bringing in new healing methods. Caroline has one she's been calling time loop therapy. She's looking for people. Um, and just so much beautiful light coming through from folks who honestly, we're going to see a lot of different sort of old new therapies, old new healing modalities. I'm seeing a lot of that already popping up. People are coming for sessions and they're like, my brain is going to explode. I have so much information and it's just kind of coming out of nowhere. And I'm like, well, this is you remembering. what you prepared to bring to the table. And it's remembrance. That's why it feels like it just comes out of nowhere, but you just know it with your whole self, right? That's remembering because we have created a lot of stuff already. We are interdimensional beings. So that being said, with that, it, expect amazing new stuff that is just both old and new. And that's the mesh. It's going to be indigenous knowledge mixed with galactic knowledge, or it's going to be, you know, quantum modalities, different types of things, different perspectives from your facet of consciousness that's going to be really amazing and suddenly available through you. Jump on it. Jump on it. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about, you know, how exact it is. Start practicing. Caroline says she needs people to play with so that she can see if some of this works and tweak it, right? This is us experimenting in a new field. And there's not going to be one big consciousness experiment placed upon humanity anymore. That's over. Now it's your experiment and mine and everything that is created in between, right? So there'll be more of that. And sometimes, an experiment will come and it'll have its life cycle and it'll look really cool and it'll create something and then it peters out. But that doesn't mean it wasn't perfect the way it was. It means that you gained exactly what challenges and wisdom and fear and desire stuff that you needed out of it so that it could be refined and then played with again with a different group of people or a different setting, right? So my friends, all the endeavors they were trying to do, it doesn't mean that those weren't exactly perfect. What it means is that they had to go through those cycles of what looked like failure to bring some pretty juicy chunks to the table and know now very keenly, very intelligently what's going to be useful now or not because they played it out. So that's going to be really neat. Very good. So I'm continuing to read through our comments here. And Joe is noticing people are really starting to ask the who am I question. Who am I really? And that's what's happening with all those healing modalities and the remembrance too. Because you're starting to trickle down into what you really are. And not everybody's meant to like go all the way down to the floor, right, of source. But a lot of us will get down to this point where we're like, wow, I really remember a lot and this is fun. I want to play here. I want to play in consciousness here where I can be this, where I can be a quantum healer. I can be a seer now finally, or I can be of service in this way or learn this new thing. A lot of us are just here to learn, honestly. So if you're not coming up with like new modalities and stuff, don't beat yourself up. That has not that there's no better way to do this thing. Okay? And if you're just in receive mode, oh my gosh, revel in it. Lay back and receive and just absorb and learn. I know a lot of you, this is normal. A lot of you will take lots and lots and lots of different classes. And then people are like, and now you can do a business. Now you can have a career, but that might not interest you. So you've been collecting all these different classes and things because you're here to absorb and learn. Because you know why? You know why that's important? Why we need all these learners? Because when they learn something, it becomes available in consciousness. It wasn't available then until you learned it. And that's really how this works. That's why we need as many learners out there as we need new modalities, as we need teachers, as we need people who simply meditate and pray and give blessings. Okay, there's got to be a balance of all these things for our new compassionate global culture to work. So that's why not all of us are here to be teachers. That's not necessary. That'd be very boring. So there's much, much, much dynamism going on with the types of people and what they're doing as they find the I am presence. It's very cool and special to watch. So Jean is asking a nice question. I live in a major city. How do I honor the land? I would say sitting down in a park. So find a nice park, find a tree, right? Find a tree. A lot of times those trees, especially in a big city, have been there a long time if they're being preserved in a big park, right? Just sit up against the tree and meditate for a little while and then greet the tree, greet the land under the tree, greet the land underneath the city. The city's built on top of the land. And you just say, I'm here. Just greet the land. That's the first step. Spend a couple of months saying hello to the earth underneath the apartment building or the city. And then what you'll find is in that continuous creation of a relationship, there'll be little things that show up where suddenly you feel compelled while you're at the park to start feeding the birds or picking up extra trash or finding, oh, this waterway needs to be cleared. What if we got a little group together and did a cleanup together? We did like a cleanup potluck, right? Or whatever, something will arise, something will show up as, hey, there is stuff I can do. Now, if you're called to go deeper, there is a lot there. And the underworld is very immense. But just for now, just build a relationship of greeting and hello, gratitude, and kindness. And then there's trust, there's rapport. And then the land will give you things and ask you for stuff like, hey, could you help me clean this up? And you'll feel it. You'll just feel compelled. I really want to feed the birds today. It's very cold. It's been snowing for ages. There's no food anymore. Wow, they need food. I'm going to go buy a little bag of bird seed and see what happens. See how that feels. See how the land feels when you do that, right? That's my suggestion to get started. And it'll unfold and it'll be unique. I have no idea exactly what will happen, but it'll be really fun nonetheless. So I like these different kinds of ideas, right? So we have some folks who are talking about what they're going to leave behind. And Billy asks a really good question. What do we need to get rid of and what do we need to merge with? Well, that's a very good question. So for me, around the alcohol, for example, I really needed to merge with all of my guilt, all of my lineage's guilt, because we deal with our lineage trauma too. That's the bulk of the trauma in your body. I really had to merge with my sadness about some of the really stupid stuff I've done while being drunk, right? Um, that's like peak level of stupid. So there's an instant like, oh, I'm super dumb and I hate myself. Gotta merge with that. Um, and then merging with the cravings, because those are very intense emotions. So these are like emotions and reactions around the thing that I'm trying to change my relationship with. And by merging with those bad feelings, then they dissolve the trauma in the body. So you find the frequency and you find it in your body. Like, where's my guilt around alcohol? Well, right now I don't have any, but before when I did, it was right here. And it'd go all the way to my solar plexus from my throat. And there's this guilt, and it was really heavy and constricting. And so you find the frequency and you go and you just stand in it and you feel guilty. You just feel it more and more and more until it becomes unbearable. And when it becomes unbearable, you're almost done. Don't give up. And this could take days, weeks, months. Sometimes it could take a day. But I'm finding people are processing stuff real fast. And I'm processing really, really fast. So you're being supported in this. But I'll just stand in it and hang out in it until it moves through me. And then there's this instant after the unbearableness of the guilt, and that it's like a waterfall that you just moved through. And then you're like, whoa, I feel way lighter suddenly. That's why I said it's very sudden. And as you come out of it, it doesn't mean that like it's perfectly over. It means that a big layer is done. And so like the next time your friends are like, "Let's go get margaritas." And you go have a margarita, see how it feels. Do you suddenly feel guilty? Is there any guilt there? If there is, there's another layer showing up. You can say, "All right, I'm gonna deal with this." So you go in and you do it again. I've learned how to do this like on the back burner simultaneously while I'm functioning in my life because I'm processing constantly. If I have any reaction to anything at all, then I'm processing it immediately, and I'll work on it until it's done, but I'll keep it going in my subconscious. This is because I've been doing processing for over 15 years now, just solid. And now I'm just really good at it. So that you can get to that point where it's always happening in the background. And that's really cool because it's just more and more light all the time. Um, so that's key. I think then of course, what are you leaving behind? Well, I would say simply like the structure of the relationship between you and the thing. So I don't have I'm going to change my relationship. I'm leaving behind this. I need to drink half a bottle of wine so I can sleep, or I just had a horrible stressful day full of like sessions where everyone's being tortured all the time and I'm like overwhelmed. I'm going to drink. Well, that's gone, and I don't want that anymore. That's the structure. The guilt when I do drink, that's the thing I'm merging with. So now I'm saying, well, what's the new structure? And I was given a new structure because I was ready for it, right? No sooner and no later, only the moment that I'm ready. And the new structure is, well, make your own, make it magical, make it medicine. Wow. And that feels good. And there's no guilt in there. There's only just this really deep appreciation and a very different structure. So I'm leaving behind the structure of the relationship with the thing, and I'm processing the emotions and feelings and traumas and merging with them so that they don't have power over me anymore. So that the guilt around alcohol doesn't have to live in my body anymore. And that's the difference. I hope that helped. Good. So um Cheryl says she's leaving behind what I see what's wrong with someone when I'm doing Rolfing, right? So she got trained and you're looking around saying, "What's wrong with everyone? Oh, you've got a limp, or oh, you have a scoliosis, or your jaw's crooked." And now instead she's saying, "That's beautiful, and so is that, and so is that." Very good example. So she might process and merge with any guilt around having seen people that way. I relate to that because I'm always like they're demonically oppressed and they have like I can't help but to see stuff all the time. I do my best not to be nosy, um, uh, but if someone like a friend is sitting there, it's really hard not to say "Hey, I see something wrong. Can I help you?" While I'm processing my desire to be useful. I'm merging with that and the guilt that I have over having projected wrongness on anything, right? So good. Um, that's a really neat thing to watch as it shifts, right? Good. And I agree. The greatest teacher always is yourself. That's why you're here in a body. Yes. And yeah, I absolutely agree, Janine. My teacher's teacher, Dr. Frederick Lenz, he had a lot of ego and he abused his power like so many teachers of that time did. And it's because enlightenment was purely mental up to that point. And now it's not. It can't be. It can't exist that way anymore. Um, it won't work. I would argue we're in a different playing field, but beyond what he was while in the body, I have learned an immense amount from him as he traverses the dimensions. So that's something that happens. There's many great teachers out there in the multidimensional universe that aren't in a human body necessarily, but perhaps they were. And I would say he's a much better teacher than he was while he was in the body. And I'm proud for that. And that's really interesting though. I agree. It's funny that we could have been enlightened, people could have attained that, but then still had such huge egos, right? It's a trip. Yeah. Yeah, and teachers, a good teacher, like Cheryl's saying, they do trigger the very best of us, right? And they push us. My teacher certainly does. Lucia will absolutely point stuff out, but she knows now that I'll turn on a dime. She knows now that I'll take it and I'll run with it. And even if it's really, really hard, and it has been, but that I say more, 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 give me more. I want more. And that's definitely key. So, Marty's asking a good question on guidance. Would you say that a solid protocol would be to only communicate through your higher self, your gatekeep, you, the gatekeeper, your soul? Well, sort of. I think that you know the the that. Sorry, I'm like 10 steps ahead in my words, and I have to like come back and because I have thoughts for you, but I'm over here. My mouth is here. So first off, there is no separation between you and all the guides. That's an illusion, right? That's the illusion of the movement. The illusion is that you're not this, that there's all these movements, and then there's, your movement here and mine here, and all that, and that they're separate. It's not true. They're all one, they're all intimately linked. The second thing is, it is always a very, very good idea to try to speak from the soul. And when you do, you'll find quite clearly through mindfulness. And this is a quick note on the basics. I've been doing mindfulness again more and more because I did not get it well enough the first 20,000 times. So, revisiting the basics is key, especially now because they're going to be refreshed in a new way and old pieces will come up to support that. Well, it's always good to speak from the soul. Do your best to do that and notice whenever your brain and your personality and your body and your trauma want to come in and paint it and elaborate on it or embellish it, right? Like I notice when I'm around my friends now I'm able to like rein it in almost to zero, almost. where I'm not being sitting there saying, "How can I help you?" Like I'm before that, it was just constant. "Oh, I want to help with that. Can I help with that? Can I help with that?" And that wasn't my soul. Luminosity, which is my essence, is. It's not useful or unuseful. It just is. And in that beingness, as I back past that, I find the source field, right? So the other thing too is the guides that you have drawn in for you are exactly what you need, and some of them are your enemies. And those are drawn in by you through your storyline getting home to source, because those dark forces teach you a lot. And by understanding them as teachers, as actually being guidance of like, well, no, I don't want to take that path, or no, I don't want you in my field, that teaches you a huge amount of information. So guides don't always show up as beautiful angels, my friends. They also show up as demons. And the darkness can guide you because it's going to lead you to places that you don't want to be, and then you make big changes to not end up going down that rabbit hole, right? But none of that's separate from you. And it's all light under pressure anyway. All darkness is other gradations of light. So that's my perspective on that. That you can't always like sit there and say, "Well, I'm only going to listen to my higher self." It doesn't quite work like that because you're using your body to do that, and it is mainly not even made of you. So who's really doing the discerning here of who your higher self is? You're using your body, which is a symbiotic meta being made of bazillions of different beings, to say that you're going to speak to your higher self, or only speak from or through, right? So, no, it's not exactly like that, but you can always endeavor to say, I intend to speak from my soul and not my ego right now. Like today, I'm really intending it. I'm doing my very best. Um, but everything is you teaching you. That's that's sort of the end all of that one, I think. I hope that helps too. Ah, yes. NT says that vagus nerve eye exercises have helped balance out the nervous system. I really like that. Um, and no, my friend does not have a website, but she does. She's going to be doing bigger projects over the next year, and I will be talking to you about it because I'm involving myself. So I hope to bring some of her work to the table for you. Um, but NT's talking about vagus nerve eye exercises and breathing. It helps me too. And then if you ever have panic attacks, this is crazy because I had one that was really, really bad and it took me by surprise because my mind felt fine. Like I do have a very peaceful, clear mind, but it is my nervous system that's still dealing with trauma, right? Um, I suddenly had a terrible panic attack and it was really bad. And I remembered with my very calm mind, even though my body wasn't calm, that ice cubes, if you stick a little ice cube right in your mouth and you press it up against the top of the roof of your mouth, it does crazy stuff. It like completely resets your nervous system, and it stopped my panic attack instantly. So if any of you have problems, ice cubes are really, or if you're in really cold area, snow, not yellow snow, right? But yeah, it worked amazingly fast. Uh, but breathing and stuff like that. There's also a huge summit out there all about the vagus nerve. And so if you look up like Summit, Summit, vagus nerve, there's this big, huge summit with all these experts on the vagus nerve and like trauma and nervous system problems and panic and PTSD and CPTSD and stuff. And so I highly recommend that. I've learned a lot from that one. I like to take classes too, by the way, all the time. I take new stuff all the time. Good. Yeah. Um, just kind of keep scrolling through here and see if there's any newer stuff that's come up. So, Visual Thinker is asking, I have some new indigenous guides that have moved to my new property. How can I communicate with them, counsel with them on a daily basis? That's wonderful. I feel like that's opening up as part of where we're at. The ancestors are here to help out, right? Because you are their skin in the game. It's you. So they want the very best for us, and that's really key. I'm not an expert on ancestors, but for me, first, it's just simply to do the same thing you would with the land and greet it, notice them, say hello every day, build a friendship. Don't try to give or take anything right away, right? And just simply be present in gratitude with them and just be. And then when you feel ready, ask about reconciliation. How can I reconcile today? And they'll give you the things that will help, and they'll present stuff to you, and it'll be surprising in different ways that you didn't expect. And after some reconciliation has occurred with you, the ancestors, the land, then there can be a time where they might bring in information that will be valuable to you, where you can take counsel. So take your time. Be very always in a state of humility and gratitude, because those were the people that came before you. Their bodies and their histories built the foundation you stand on. And that's really key. And then reconciling with the land and the people that came before us is on the table. And that's the precious, precious second step. And then many different councils and different kinds of information will come through that you can then use for yourself and others. So always be in service and gratitude and humility first, and just be friendly, exist with, and show I am safe. I am nurturing. I am here. I see you, I feel you, and I just want to be with you right now. That's the first step. It's so wonderful. Good for you. Good. All right. So I'm coming down to just answer one more question here. And just see if anything is showing up here. Saying, can you clarify the difference? So is it so it is healing the body, the muscles, tendons, alignment, etc., to make a comfortable place to live, to express yourself and soul. It's both, honey. It's both. Because your emotional self, right? We have four parts to ourself: your emotional self, your mental self, your physical self, and your spiritual self. All these need attention. And they all dramatically affect the body, which is from the DNA up, right? It's the DNA, it's the microbiome, it's the virome, right? It's the cellular, it's the muscles, it's the tissues, it's the organs. Okay? And in all of that is written a lot of epigenetic memory, much of it deeply traumatic. That's why I always say trauma healing is the number one thing you can be doing alongside meditation or prayer to bring in light. We clear out and unravel the trash, and then we bring in light. So we process with the trauma, we bring in the light through meditation or prayer to rejuvenate and heal. Okay. And the body changes a lot with that. Emotional processing creates dramatic physical effects. I am living proof. I have a bazillion different examples of how that works. And I'll be teaching that a lot over the next year for you. Now, then, of course, mental processes. You need to be able to have a nice, calm, quiet mind, right? It's hard to do, but there's a lot of programs in your head. And there's a lot of pretty nasty thoughts that you run through. And you've learned how to ignore them so you can cope. And so you need to heal that too. All the ways that I was able to do it, um, just from my perspective, is here in the description. There's that little arrow right down here. If you click it, there'll be a document that can pop up. Just download it, and you've got all the resources that you could want to do this. Okay. But if you need physical healing so that you can be more comfortable being a soul in this body right now, then definitely tackle your emotional and mental self first. Okay. And then go in and bring in the exact right things that will help your body heal. I wouldn't be able to fully utilize the beautiful herbal medicines that my friend gave me if I wasn't mentally and emotionally cleaned up enough, because we hold it. The body's epigenetic memory holds trauma and it manifests as illness. So every single illness has a foundational piece to it, which is the emotional mental trauma of it. And a lot of times the trauma of it happened, and then the physical, it was held for so long that finally it got manifest in the physical. So a lot of times you'll have like weird stuff just pop up out of nowhere. And you're like, what in the, what's going on? But if you track it back, it always had a root emotional mental trauma to it. So that's definitely something I'm going to show you how to work with over this next year. Because healing's on the table, I think it's a huge message for 2022. Let's make it all about healing and relationships, new relationships with new things, right? Very good. All right. Yeah. So excellent questions. I'm sorry I couldn't finish answering all of them. I love them. But I want to be able to build a pillar of light with you. And this is fun. So if you haven't done this before, I think you'll enjoy it. And so I'm asking Source, I'm asking the community here, just in your presence, and I'm asking the earth, where do we need this pillar the most right now? I'm just kind of getting a good scan of the planet here. What I'm looking for is the most dense dark space, because that's usually what'll pop out when I ask this question. So I'm seeing the globe, right? And I'm just scanning her, and you can do this with me. And I'm just scanning, 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 and I'm asking, where would you like this done as a service to the earth and her people? Ah, this is a spot we have not ever paid attention to. A lot of times I'll read about the spot like shortly before we get together. And then I'm always like, wow, okay, well, it was already like popping out to me. It's actually Nicaragua. Now, here's why. I was reading an article about the immigration of the people of South America, right? And immigration is normal. It's very normal. Borders are normal too. But this has become such a hot, horrifying topic of fear. And we're missing the souls of these people, right? We're missing the soul of the migrant by running it through politics. And politics distorts stuff because politics is supposed to be divisive, isn't it? It's supposed to be. Good politics is very merit based. Good politics is very um, clean, but we don't really have any of that right now. I don't think we've had that for a couple of eons. But if you really look past the politics of immigration, there's this huge amount of people suffering, and they're trying to, or they've been promised a carrot on a stick. They're trying to find something better. Whatever they're facing in their personal lives is not going to work for them. And they've been pushed to make a choice. And that's a pretty terrible choice that they've had to make. And I read an article just this morning talking about how Nicaragua is sort of like the new hotbed of immigration. Lots of heated opinions about all that sort of thing, and lots of really good points on both sides. Remember that division can't stand, folks, about all of this. If we are able to just go ahead and put that aside, Nicaragua now is this place where there's a lot of movement going through. If we could build a pillar of light for the entire country of Nicaragua, what would happen? That's something we haven't done. We have put pillars of light in really specific cities and very specific places on the map, but we've never built one so big that it actually contained the whole country. So from now on, our pillars, and this is the new, right? We're going to do something that we've done that's old, which is building pillars of light, which are full of intention and light and prayer and hope and joy and all these wonderful things that literally are fourth dimensional structures that exist there as transmitters. So, what are we going to transmit to all these people? What if we were able to transmit unconditional love to it through a pillar as big as a whole country? We haven't done that before. We haven't made it so big that it contains a whole place. Let's do it. Because movement, the movement of people, the migration of humanity is normal and it's constant. I am an immigrant. I migrated here to Ecuador. And so that's popping up as really important for all the people in the world who are saying, where I am at right now is not going to work for me. I can't survive like this. There's a lot of people saying that. So let's do it. All right. Absolutely. So Janine's saying, tendrils of light can reach out to all those sort of bridge countries because Nicaragua is a bridge country. Yeah, I agree. Let's intend for it to spiral out there. Yeah, that'll be a new thing. We'll let the pillar move. So we're going to make it way bigger. We're going to let it move. We're going to let it spiral out. Okay. All right. So just want you to imagine Nicaragua, right? You're already zoomed out because we've got the globe right here. But if you pinpoint this country, let's kind of zoom in a little bit, but see the country, and we're going to function from here. We're going to function from a zoomed out perspective on the planet. And we're going to intend for this to be a moving pillar of light that spirals its light out to all of the other bridge countries like Panama and Guatemala and Colombia. Yeah. And Venezuela too. So I just want you to ground yourself. Just get in your body, wiggle your toes and your fingers. Take a deep breath. This is really easy. I'm going to walk you through it. It's fun because we get to do something nice for the planet today and for each other. It's a gift of service that you can do even if you're not feeling well. You can still do this, and that's wonderful. So, we're asking to ground this in Nicaragua, but we want to create a foundation first, and that's going to come from the gut mind. And instantly, I hear very clearly the energies that we're going to start with. And you can add your own. Remember, move any sort of politic aside. Make sure it's really clean and clear. Intend it from your soul. And we're going to come in and we're going to ask for a very peaceful relationship for all humanity with the land and the ancestors. That's going to be the foundation. A lot of these folks are leaving their ancestral homes because they think that they're going to be able to go to someplace better. And that's intense, to uproot your whole life from someplace that's been an ancestral home for sometimes thousands of years. It's very heartbreaking to do that. And the land is here to be nourished and to nourish. We want to influence that as the most positive foundation with the ancestors and the land, a reconciled and healed relationship. So I want you to feel that. Feel that really clear, healed, reconciled relationship with the land and the ancestors in your gut. And anything else you want to add to that. And now let's stand in a circle around Nicaragua and these bridge countries from South America to North America. But this is being, of course, on behalf of all those people of the world who don't feel comfortable in their home anymore. And I want you to take a deep breath and project all that energy from your gut to the foundation, but make it as big as the whole country of Nicaragua with a deep breath. Let it move through you now. I mean, all my body tingle real fast and very hot. Ooh, I'm hot now. And it just ignited something beautiful, and it's moving from when I'm looking down on it, it's moving in a clockwise pattern, which is good. That disseminates information and energy out, but it looks like lava. Good. I think reconciliation can be exactly like lava, right? Where we erase the old and bring in the new. Very powerful. Good. We'll let this unravel the way it needs to. Let's move up into the heart. And this has to do with compassion and generosity. So we want the heart of humanity, all those who are not able to give, but they're in a state of needing, right? When you move somewhere new, you need help. You need new friends, right? You need to know where to go get food. You need food. You need to be able to meet those needs you couldn't meet before. So there's a need to receive in a state of migration. You're in a state of need. And so we want to ignite the world with great compassion and generosity around all this. And so I want you to pull that up in your heart and any other intentions you have for the people who need to receive and for the people who will be giving, right? We want people to receive without guilt. We want people to receive without entitlement. And we want people to give generously with great love. So I want you to imagine that in your heart, feel it fully. And with a deep breath, make your also projection as big as that whole country of Nicaragua at the center of the pillar, this huge pillar, with a deep breath now. It just created the most beautiful sense of peace, very still. It's still moving, but at the center of it, what we've created is deeply peaceful and it's white light. It's like this very pure, colorless light that is very still. It's almost like source light. It's still moving a little bit, but it's very full. It feels very full and rich. Good. Yeah. Immediately draws me into meditative state. That's good. All right, good. Now I want you to come up here in your other brain, right? You have three brains: brain, heart, and gut. That's what we use for our pillars. And I want you to think of and imagine this next piece a compassionate culture. That's a big statement. Culture is big. Culture is not a small thing. I'm an anthropologist. I promise you, culture is immense. You are doing culture right now. It's subconscious too. And so this is a new culture. It's this new global culture we've been talking about for a while, compassionate culture. And it's not a culture that is top down, like what's being presented to us right now. Top down stuff doesn't work. What works? Local up from you and your personal culture up. That's what compassionate culture is all about. So I want you to imagine that. To me, it looks like the most amazing, most beautiful citadel of light. It's not something physical. It's just something beautiful, other dimensional even, immense. It's right there in reach. It's available now. It wasn't available before. Now we're making a bridge for it. And we're dealing with bridge countries right now: Nicaragua, Guatemala, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela. These are the ones that bridge two massive continents together, right? So anything that comes along with that, I'd like you to bring in how that compassionate culture really feels. And with a deep breath, I'd like you to top our gigantic pillar with another added template from your soul's vantage point with a deep breath now. Oh my gosh. Well, I didn't expect that. I try not to have any expectations when we do this so that I can be a good seer for you. And a good seer does not have expectations when they do seeing. But this, and I'm always surprised. So I live in constant surprise. That's the action part of luminosity. What happened was when we did this, I could see a golden city that spans the entire globe, even above the oceans. some kind of heavenly, like a heaven on earth. Yeah, that's what it looks like, that I couldn't see before. And by intending for compassionate culture all over the globe from the local up, suddenly it was like a door open, and now I can see it's like the opposite of the matrix. Instead of a matrix of control around the globe, it's actually this gorgeous, living, breathing, heavenly city of light. And that is what the earth is and always will be. She is Eden. Eden didn't go anywhere. We were forced out of Eden through the corruption of shame. This is what the world will look like without the shame. I'm projecting it to you in hopes that you can experience this a little bit with me, because I can't really describe what I'm seeing very well. But it's deeply emotional for me, and I don't really know what to say except that it's time. I think we deserve it. We've been through enough. It's time for us to be with our beautiful planet again. Yeah. Thanks for doing this with me. It's beautiful to see it. Yeah, good. I I don't know what to say. Let's let's enjoy this, yes? We don't have to hope for it anymore. It's here. Good. If you're listening to this later, it still counts. Whatever you do is added into this. And you can keep adding. It looks a whole lot different than a normal pillar does. Now it looks like reality. So let's just unattach ourselves from this, okay? So we can actually go play. I'll meet you there. We'll go play in Indra's net and enjoy this beautiful heaven. So unattach from this pillar from your mind, your heart, and your gut with a deep breath. And just open your heart, open your body, open your mind and your spirit and all of your emotions, your emotional body, to this light. And we will bring this from the ethers, from the other dimensions, into the physical. It's what we're going to do. It's what we're doing. And that's the next step. And I'm deeply humbled to be with you today, and just glad that we get to. So I will see you in January. And I'm usually gone on Sundays, so I'm gotta rethink how I'm gonna do this. But end of the month, I will see you, and I'll let you know when. And I've been going and being with the land on Sundays, and I'm hoping to get internet out there so I can do this work with you while we're out there. But I also kind of don't want internet out there at the same time, right? It's a conundrum. But I'm just so glad that we got to meet, and I hope that you have a beautiful New Year's. I always jokingly say like Happy Gregorian calendar New Year because it's not really real New Year's, but I kind of think of the solstice as a new year. Um, but I do hope that this weekend is special for you, and I'm always thinking about you. I'm out there on Indra's net all the time, and I hear you and feel you when you think about me too. And there's just so much healing that we do for each other, and I'm very grateful for that. Because when the earthquake happened, everybody wrote me, and it was so sweet. I was very taken aback. I was surprised. And then I've been really sick, but I didn't want to make that like super public. Didn't want anybody to worry. But I do feel your healing. Thank you for taking that time. And I try to reciprocate it to you too. And soon, I hope that I can bring many of you here physically. That's my deepest hope. So I'm totally throwing a line for that. I want to do a retreat here. I want to introduce you to these healers. I want to show you this place and help you experience what this beautiful earth can offer and show you Ecuador. But let's definitely hold that in our heart that we can be able to travel more easily in this next year at some point. And I love you so much. Thank you for being with me and spending some extra time with me today. We've spent exactly 2 hours and 22 minutes. I think that's pretty cool. All right. I love all of you so much. Namaste. And we'll talk very soon. Bye, my friends.